Hi guys, sorry to interrupt your viewing, but please subscribe to the channel and like this video. Thank you.
Every Thanksgiving, without fail, I'd walk up the path to my aunt and uncle's oversized, picture-perfect house, those fake brick columns flanking the doorway like we were entering some kind of southern estate, when really it was just a two-story colonial with granite countertops and a whole lot of smog in the air. The driveway was always filled with shiny cars, BMWs, Lexus SUVs, one year a Tesla that cousin Brett wouldn't shut the hell up about, and there I was, parking 2 blocks down because my oh-so-luxurious Chevy Malibu with the dented passenger side apparently didn't fit the family aesthetic. Inside, it was always the same. My cousins, all of them dressed like they were auditioning for a goddamn Thanksgiving Day Macy's ad, gathered around the island in the kitchen, sipping wine that came from some vineyard one of them knew someone at, laughing just a little too loud when I said hello. I never got a hug. Sometimes not even eye contact. And while everyone else set their coats on the hall bench or that fancy antique hook tree by the stairs, mine always ended up slung over the back of the same folding chair that would eventually become my assigned throne for dinner. That folding chair? It squeaked and wobbled. And it was always the one next to the kids' table, not quite part of the main event, but close enough that it felt like a joke, like they were all in on it. This little tradition of placing me just far enough outside the circle that I could see what I was missing, but not far enough that I could complain without looking bitter. Let me tell you about the plates. Everyone else? Real china. The kind that came out only once a year with those tiny, faded blue flowers and the gold rim that flaked if you stared at it too long. My plate? A paper one. Not even the sturdy kind, either. One of those flimsy things you wouldn't trust with a second helping of stuffing. I shit you not, one year I got a divided plate like I was in some cafeteria. I said something about it once. Just a small joke. Something like, guess I'm in the paper goods section again. And cousin Laura looked me dead in the face and said, "Oh, Marcus, we didn't think you'd mind." No apology. Just that smirk, like I was some stray mutt who should be grateful for scraps. They whispered too. Not even subtle about it. I'd walk into the room and hear the tail end of some sentence that suddenly died when I showed up. I mean, have you seen his then poof, nothing but tight smiles and shifting eyes? I'd catch cousin Tyler looking me up and down like I was something stuck to the bottom of his designer boot. They always talked like I wasn't going to make it. Like working a warehouse job and fixing HVAC units somehow made me less than. Like I was some kind of goddamn cautionary tale. But I took it. For years, I took it. I smiled when they asked if I was still doing that, manual work. I laughed along when Uncle Rob made his annual joke about how, at least Marcus doesn't have to worry about taxes, right? I ate off those damn paper plates. I cleaned up after dinner. I raked their leaves when Grandma fell and couldn't do it. I brought real gifts for birthdays when the rest of them Venmo'd $20 and called it a day. And for what? For them to turn to each other, every single year, and say, "Well, you know Marcus." That's what they'd say. "You know Marcus." Like I was a punchline. Like I was less. But I'll tell you something about humiliation, it doesn't stay soft. It sharpens over time. Turns into something real. Solid. Like bone. You start stacking enough years of being treated like the leftover mashed potatoes, and something inside you calcifies. You don't cry. You don't explode. You plot. Quietly. Patiently. And then one year, you stop waiting for someone to see you differently. You make them see it. This year, things were different. I didn't park down the street. I didn't show up with a crinkled six-pack of beer and a plastic-wrapped pie. I didn't walk up the driveway with my head down, trying not to make eye contact. No. This year, I turned the corner of that cul-de-sac in a brand new Lincoln Navigator, the kind of vehicle that says, "I've arrived, I've leveled up, and I didn't need your damn approval to get here." She was pearl white. Clean. Not a scratch. Leather interior that smelled like money and air conditioning that didn't rattle when you turned it on. I pulled up right in front of the house, slow enough to make sure every cousin, aunt, and uncle got a good, long look through the window as I rolled by. I could see Cousin Brett's jaw tighten from where he stood on the porch holding a mimosa like a damn debutante. I saw Laura blink, once, then twice, like maybe she was seeing a ghost. And I didn't come alone. No, I didn't drag along some rented date or a fancy friend to show off. I came to make a statement. But not just for them, for Grandma. The only one who never treated me like I was beneath her. The only one who didn't give a damn about where I worked or how much I made, as long as I showed up when it mattered. So I stepped out of the Navigator, straightened my jacket, yeah, I wore a jacket this year, and walked right up to that porch, past the cousins and their shocked little stares. I gave Grandma a kiss on the cheek, offered her my arm, and said the words like I'd rehearsed them 100 times. You ready, Grandma? Just you and me this year. The silence that followed could have frozen fire. And I swear to God, the look on Uncle Rob's face? Worth every damn year of plastic plates. I didn't say much when I walked through the front door, just a quiet, happy Thanksgiving with that same slow nod I'd been using for years, though this time it wasn't from shame or exhaustion, it was control. The kind of calm you wear when you know something they don't, like a card up your sleeve that's about to shift the whole damn table. I could smell the food already, rosemary and butter, and that sugary stink from those sweet potatoes Cousin Laura insists on baking with mini marshmallows like she's still in 3rd grade. The room was packed tighter than usual, with coats piled on chairs and drinks already in hand. Someone had football on mute in the living room, and there was that hum of conversation, of laughter that sounded just a bit too forced, like everyone was trying to outhost one another. And they all noticed me, even if they didn't say it. Their eyes darted to the front window the second the Lincoln pulled up, and now their fake smiles were stretching a little too tight, like they were trying to act unbothered while choking on surprise. Brett raised his glass, gave me that smug half-grin he always used when he smelled money nearby. Marcus, he said, dragging my name like it was a joke he hadn't finished yet, didn't recognize you under all that leather and success. Laughter. Quiet, but enough to sting if you let it. I didn't bite. I just smiled, said nothing, and walked past him like he was air. Grandma was in the den, sitting in her usual spot on that plaid recliner with the blanket she crocheted years ago draped over her knees. Her glasses hanging from that little beaded chain she swore made her look classy, but not too old. She looked up the moment I stepped in and smiled in a way no one else in that house had ever managed, genuine, warm, like she saw me, not the job, not the car, not the past. I was starting to wonder if you'd show, she said, her voice as steady as ever despite the tremble in her hands. I bent down, kissed her cheek, and held up the key fob with a little grin. I came to kidnap you, I said, and her eyes twinkled like we were sharing some secret the rest of them couldn't touch. Now let me paint this for you. The moment I helped Grandma up from that recliner, slipped her coat gently over her shoulders, and walked her past the crowd of cousins and uncles and smug-ass, ants like she was royalty leaving a bad party. Silence. Full-on, church funeral silence. Not a word. Not even from Uncle Rob, who usually had a quip loaded for every breath I took. Outside, I opened the passenger door like a damn chauffeur, helped her in with slow, careful movements, making sure every single person in that room had time to register what was happening. I got in, started the car, and didn't even glance in the mirror as we pulled away. If anyone waved, I didn't see it. I had something better than a wave. I had Grandma's smile, and I had the road. It was a 3-hour drive, about 150 minutes, through winding hills and open country that turned gold under the late fall sun. I didn't rush it. I let her pick the music, old jazz, the kind with horns that sang like they remembered sorrow, and we talked. About nothing. About everything. She asked me about work, about the promotion, about whether I was still seeing that girl from payroll. I told her we'd broken up months ago. She said good, that woman never brought pie and couldn't cook rice without burning it. When we pulled into the hotel, one of those mountain resorts with long glass windows and fireplaces that crackled like they were trying to seduce you, I could feel her watching me. She didn't say anything right away. Just looked. Not with pride, exactly. Something deeper. Something like relief. Like she'd been waiting for this moment for longer than I had. Dinner was quiet, elegant. Tablecloths like snow, steak like butter, and service that treated her like a queen instead of someone too slow to matter. I ordered the wine. She didn't ask the price. We laughed more than I expected, and somewhere between dessert and coffee she leaned in close and said, "I always knew you'd be the one." Just like that. Like it was a fact, not a compliment. Like the sun would rise and Marcus would make it. End of story. I didn't ask what she meant. I didn't need to. Sometimes people say the thing you've been aching to hear your whole life, and the worst thing you can do is make them explain it. That night, I tucked her into one of those oversized hotel beds, the ones where you sink in so deep it feels like the mattress is trying to keep you forever. She smiled again, eyes already drooping, and whispered, "This is the nicest thing anyone's done for me in years." I sat with that for a long time. Let it settle into my bones. The next morning, we ate pancakes with pecan butter and bacon that crackled like it was alive. We walked through the pine trees, watched some birds she pretended to know the names of. I didn't correct her. Who cares if a red-crested whatever isn't real? She was happy. On Sunday evening, just as the sky turned that shade of bruised purple, we pulled back into the driveway. The house looked the same, but something felt different. I helped her out of the car, carried her bag, and walked her up the steps. And just before we opened the door, she turned to me, reached into her purse, and pulled out a thick, sealed envelope. She didn't hand it to me right away. Just looked me in the eye, serious now, all the playfulness gone. "You don't have to read it yet," she said softly. "Just know, they're not gonna like it." She placed it in my hand and patted it once, like she was handing over more than paper. Like she was handing over the final move in a game that had been going on for years, without me knowing I was a player. The door opened. Light spilled out. Voices and smells and the same old noise. But something had shifted. And I was ready. Morning came with that heavy, low silence that only follows a storm that never quite hit, just a strange, unsettled calm, like everyone in the house had been waiting for something to explode and instead got nothing but their own nerves echoing back at them. I woke up early, earlier than anyone else, brewed a pot of strong coffee in a kitchen I hadn't stepped into since I was 17 and had been told, not asked, to wash the dishes without even eating first. The smell filled the place like a memory that didn't belong to them anymore, and I sipped it slow, watching the sun smear orange streaks across the lawn like someone had spilled a bottle of fire over the grass. By 8 o'clock, most of them were awake, dragging their feet down the hallway in overpriced pajamas, still half dreaming of the version of the world where they ran everything and I was just the guy who showed up late and left early, wearing the same 3 shirts in rotation. Brett passed me in the hallway with a raised eyebrow, clearly expecting me to have vanished into smoke sometime during the night. He didn't say good morning, and I didn't offer it either. No need to pretend anymore. Grandma came down around 9, dressed already, her lipstick on perfectly, that little cardigan she always wore buttoned all the way up like she was headed to church. There was something in the way she held herself that morning, a stillness that made the air shift. I knew something was coming, but I didn't ask. I just watched. By 10, everyone had gathered in the den, like they always did when someone was about to say grace or pretend they didn't hate each other for 90 minutes. Except this time, no one looked relaxed. The air felt thick with tension, even thicker than usual, and the smell of leftover gravy and old wine made it feel like the walls were sweating out decades of secrets. Grandma stood in front of the fireplace, calm as a monk, and held up the envelope like it was a church offering or a goddamn lottery ticket. Nobody spoke. Even the twins, Laura's kids who couldn't sit still for 5 seconds without screaming, were weirdly silent, probably sensing something in the air even their parents couldn't explain. She didn't drag it out. Didn't clear her throat. Didn't tell a story. Didn't ask for anyone's understanding. She just said, "It's done," and handed the envelope to me. That's it. No fanfare. No gather around, children. Just those 2 words and then silence. Real silence, the kind that pounds in your ears because no one knows what to say. I looked down at the thick white paper, my name typed clean across the front, and I could feel their stares start to turn sharp, like knives being drawn just out of reach. Laura dropped her mimosa. It shattered on the tile, and that somehow made it worse, because now the silence had teeth. Uncle Frank's face went red like someone had dunked him in a boiling pot of cranberry sauce, and his jaw clenched so tight I could hear the crack of his molars grinding. "What the hell is this?" Brett asked, voice higher than usual, like maybe his ego had finally taken a punch to the throat. Grandma didn't flinch. "It's my will," she said, plain and steady. "Already signed. Already notarized. All legal. You left it all to him?" Laura snapped, voice shaking with that performative tremble she always pulled out when she wanted to seem wounded. "After everything we've done for you? You mean like ditching me in the hospital lobby that time I fell and broke my hip?" Grandma asked, still calm, still unshaken. "Or forgetting my birthday 4 years in a row?" Uncle Rob tried to speak but only coughed, like the truth was a bone caught in his throat. Aunt Denise stood up suddenly and stormed into the hallway, maybe thinking she could undo 40 years of selfishness with a few frantic phone calls. "This is elder abuse," Tyler said, grabbing his phone from the coffee table, his fingers already dancing across the screen like he was looking up a lawyer on Yelp. "We can contest this." "You're clearly not of sound. Sit down, Tyler," Grandma said sharply, and he did, which told me everything I needed to know about who really ran that family, and it sure as hell wasn't the people who thought their salaries made them untouchable. I stood there holding the envelope, not moving, not saying a word. I didn't have to. The weight of what it meant was already burning through their thin layers of politeness, exposing the rod underneath. Every polite smile. Every passive-aggressive jab. Every holiday where they made sure I knew I was barely tolerated. It all came crashing down in one thick envelope. "You manipulated her," Brett said, stepping closer like he was trying to intimidate me with his cologne and his bad investments. "Took her for a ride, and now I laughed." Actually laughed. Not loud. Just enough for him to hear the disbelief in it. "You really think I'd need to manipulate her? After the way you've treated her?" "She's confused," Laura said, her voice shrill now, shaky, desperate. "I'm not confused," Grandma said, her voice suddenly louder than I'd ever heard it. "I've been watching all of you for years. I know who visits and who doesn't. I know who remembers my doctor appointments, who actually listens when I talk, and I know who only calls when they think I might be close to death. That shut them all up. And still, I hadn't opened the envelope. Still hadn't said a word to defend myself, because truth doesn't need a defense. It just waits patiently for everyone else to catch up. The room was vibrating now with unspoken accusations, like they were all just waiting for someone to make the next move. And in that thick, spoiled silence, I looked around at all of them, faces twisted with panic and fake concern, eyes darting, calculating, and I finally spoke. "Anybody want a slice of pumpkin pie?" I asked, calm as hell. And then I walked into the kitchen. It's funny how people only start watching you closely once they think you've taken something they wanted for themselves, as if your every movement might offer some clue on how to reverse time, how to undo years of their own neglect and rewrite the past in their favor. That week after the will reveal, the house felt like a pressure cooker, quiet on the surface, but ready to explode at the first wrong look. My cousins, my aunts, my uncles, they all walked around pretending to be polite, trying to claw their way back into Grandma's good graces, even though the ink was dry and the truth had already burned itself into the paper. They started treating me with this weird mix of fear and forced friendliness, like I was some snake they were trying to charm before it bit again. I didn't play into it. I stayed quiet. Let them squirm. But in the quiet moments, when Grandma and I were alone, I felt something different, something soft and final in the way she looked at me. Like she was tired in a way no rest could cure. She wasn't dying, not yet, but it was like she'd finally laid down the last stone of a path she'd been building alone for decades, and now she was just sitting on the porch, waiting for the sky to change. We'd sit in the den in the evenings, just the two of us, the television turned low, her knitting needles clicking against one another like some old metronome keeping time with a heartbeat no one else could hear. And then one night, not long after the will had been passed into my hands like a torch or a curse, she looked up from her stitching and said, "You know, Marcus, they were never really mine." I asked what she meant, but I already knew. She meant the family, the blood, the noise, the ones who came out of obligation and guilt. They wanted what I had, not who I was, she said, setting the yarn aside like it no longer deserved her attention. But you were different. That night, the stories came out not all at once, but in a slow, deliberate trickle like water finding its way through cracked stone. She told me about the time Uncle Frank came begging for money to cover a gambling debt, swearing it was a one-time mistake, and how she'd loaned him $10,000 just to keep his name out of the papers. He never paid it back. Never mentioned it again. She told me how Aunt Denise used to steal her medication, calling it borrowing, and how Cousin Laura tried to sell one of her antique cabinets behind her back, figuring she was too old to notice what was missing. And through all of it, she never cried. Not once. Just told the truth like it was weather, nothing to be emotional about, just a condition of the air she'd breathed for too long. I listened, stunned and not stunned at the same time, because somewhere deep down I'd always known they saw her as something to inherit, not someone to love. But hearing it in her voice, that brittle edge of betrayal so calmly delivered, lit a slow fire in my chest that I still haven't been able to put out. She told me about her garden, about how after Grandpa died no one ever helped her with it except me. How I'd show up every Saturday morning, no matter how tired or hungover or angry I was at the world, and pull weeds with her until our backs ached and the sun made our necks raw. She remembered every flower we planted, every hour we spent in the dirt. "You were the only one who came without asking for something," she said, and that broke something in me I didn't know was still whole. They accused me of manipulating her, of poisoning her mind, of worming into her heart like some slick conman with a long game and no shame. Laura cornered me in the kitchen one afternoon and hissed something about lawyers and contests and mental fitness. "You changed her," she spat, like the idea of someone earning Grandma's love was more disgusting than someone buying it. "She was fine until you showed up with that car and your smug face, and she made up her mind before the car," I said, not loud but firm. "Before the job. Before any of it." And that was the truth. She knew things. Things they wanted to stay buried. Things that made them squirm like worms under a flipped-over stone. And more than that, she remembered things every slight, every forgotten visit, every cold call and missed birthday and polite smile that dripped with pity. A week later, she didn't wake up. There was no scene, no drama. She just went to sleep in her bed with her hands folded, like she was waiting for someone to pick her up and take her somewhere better. I found her the next morning, still as a statue, the kind of stillness that doesn't belong to the living. I didn't cry, not right away. I just sat beside her, held her hand, and whispered, "Thank you," because what else do you say to someone who gave you everything when everyone else gave you nothing? At the funeral, they tried to rewrite the past. Said all the right things in all the wrong ways. Talked about how much she meant to them, how much she'd be missed, how much of a loss it was for the whole family. But I knew better. I knew they were grieving what they didn't get, not who they'd lost. After the service, the lawyer came to me in the parking lot, still holding that envelope like it was radioactive. He asked if I wanted to move forward, if I wanted to enforce the will as written, or if I wanted to amend anything, distribute portions, make peace. I looked out across the cemetery, at the line of cars, the cold expressions, the stiff hugs and empty condolences. And then I said it, quiet and final. Let them fight over it. Walking away was never part of the plan. Not really, but sometimes you get what you always wanted and suddenly it doesn't fit the way you thought it would, like trying on a suit that looks good in the mirror but feels tight in all the wrong places. After the funeral, after the false tears had dried and the casserole dishes had been scraped clean and the cousins had slunk off to their cars with that tight little knot of bitterness pulsing in their throats, I stood at the top of Grandma's porch for what felt like an hour and listened to nothing. Not traffic, not birds, not even wind, just stillness so deep it felt like a blanket pulled over the world, and for the first time in my life, I understood what she meant when she said silence was the loudest truth of all. I didn't make a speech. I didn't pose for pictures with the lawyer or print out any victory letters. I didn't answer the dozen voicemails from Brett demanding to know if I'd had time to reflect, like he thought that phrase might work some kind of magic on me and erase the decades he spent talking to me like I was gum stuck to his patent leather shoe. I didn't respond to the group text Laura sent out with a carefully worded paragraph about unity and healing that read more like a hostage note than anything sincere. I just kept the navigator, donated the rest of the stuff from the hotel weekend, and drove out to the coast for a few days with no particular plan. The house? I let it sit. The money? I didn't touch it. Not out of principle or some dramatic sense of honor. I just didn't feel like any of it mattered right then. The lawyer called twice more, said he needed a formal response on the disbursement plan. I told him he'd get one soon. What I didn't tell him was that I'd already delivered the envelope Grandma had written before she died, the one I found tucked behind the old tin box in her bedroom, sealed in faded ivory paper and addressed to whichever of them cares enough to listen. I left it with him. Told him to read it at his discretion, preferably after the dust settled. What they didn't know was that the letter wasn't for them. Not really, it was for me. A copy was inside a smaller envelope, marked in her handwriting with my name and nothing else, like she knew the rest of them wouldn't understand it even if they heard it straight from her lips. She wrote it longhand, her script neat but tired, looping in places like it had paused for breath. She didn't waste words. She never did. But what she wrote cut deeper than anything I could have said on my own. Marcus, I know you're not like them. That's why you deserve it all. But if you decide to walk away, that's fine. Just promise me one thing. Never forget what silence sounds like when you finally become the one they can't ignore. That silence, they'll choke on it. And you? You'll breathe just fine. There were no instructions. No final requests. Just that single truth, wrapped in paper and waiting like a trapdoor beneath their feet. A month passed, then 2, and I stayed quiet. Didn't show up to the emergency family Zoom meetings. Didn't respond to the cousin who sent me an Instagram message saying we should chat about legacy stuff like it was a casual brunch plan. I didn't deny them anything. I didn't confirm anything either. And eventually, they started turning on each other like rats in a sinking ship, Laura accusing Brett of coercing Grandma, Tyler trying to invalidate the notary's signature, Frank claiming Grandma was manipulated because she'd missed his birthday last year, as if that was proof she'd lost her mind. But I watched from a distance, just far enough that they could see my shadow but never my face, and I let them fall apart. The lawyer did what he had to do, distributed copies of the letter to each of them, word for word, no explanation beyond her signature. Some of them pretended it was fake. Some pretended it meant nothing. But I knew, and deep down, so did they. When Thanksgiving came around the next year, I wasn't there. The family gathered at the same house, same turkey, same mismatched wine glasses, same tired jokes that only sounded good after the third drink. But something was missing, and it wasn't just Grandma. The house felt hollow in the footage I later saw. Someone had filmed part of the dinner and posted it to a private family feed, not realizing I still had access. The camera caught little things they couldn't fake. The way Laura stared at the empty head of the table. The way Uncle Frank kept glancing at the door like someone might walk in at any moment and fix everything. The way nobody sat in the chair I'd once been stuck with, the folding one by the wall. It stayed folded, leaning against the side like a reminder. Or maybe a warning. Someone brought up my name during dessert. I don't know who. The camera didn't catch that, but the effect was immediate. The room dropped 10 degrees. Nobody said anything. Nobody laughed. The silence was absolute, sharp as glass. Like they all knew something had been lost that couldn't be replaced, and worse, couldn't be ignored. And that was the twist. Not that I got the money. Not that I walked away. The real twist was this. They'd built their whole world on being louder, richer, more important. And then one day, the quietest one in the room left and took the air with him. They thought revenge would come screaming. Instead, it came silent. And it stayed.